It was one of those New York afternoons when the city felt alive in every direction. Horns blaring, people laughing, coffee cups clinking. Lady Gaga had wrapped herself in a long beige coat, sunglasses covering most of her face, trying to disappear into the rhythm of the streets she once called home. No makeup, no entourage. Just her headphones, and the comfort of anonymity. She turned down a narrow block near Washington Square Park, a place where dreamers and street artists had always gathered. She'd walked here 100 times before, back when she was just Stefani with a keyboard and a dream too big for her apartment. Then she heard it. A familiar sound floated above the city noise, a voice, raw but full of heart, singing words she knew better than anyone. "I'm off the deep end, watch as I dive in." Gaga stopped walking. The melody hung in the air like a ghost from her past. She took off her headphones, her heart skipping once, then again. It wasn't just any version of the song. Whoever was singing it, they meant it. Every word cracked with emotion, not perfection. She turned toward the sound and saw them. A small group of street musicians on the corner. A man with a weathered guitar, a young woman with a second-hand mic, a small speaker balanced on a milk crate. A tiny crowd had formed, maybe 10 people, and one kid was filming on an old phone. The woman's voice trembled slightly, but it carried warmth. When she hit the chorus, something inside Gaga stirred. For a moment, she wasn't a superstar. She was that same girl who once sang in bars for tips, hoping someone would listen. Gaga smiled softly, tucked her hands into her coat pockets, and walked closer, letting herself blend into the small circle of strangers. No one noticed her yet, and she didn't want them to, not yet. The music carried through the chilly air, brushing against the sound of traffic and the constant hum of New York. Gaga stood among the small group of people, hood pulled low, the brim of her sunglasses hiding most of her face. She could have left, she almost did. But something about the moment held her there, like gravity. The young woman singing wasn't perfect. Her voice cracked once when the wind caught her breath, and the cheap speaker distorted the higher notes. But none of that mattered. She was feeling the song. Every word came out like a confession, like she had lived it. "We're far from the shallow now." The words echoed down the street, catching the attention of a few more passers-by. A couple walking their dog stopped. A taxi driver honked, then rolled down his window to listen for a few seconds. Even the city, so used to noise, seemed to pause. Gaga crossed her arms, watching the singer close her eyes and pour her whole soul into the melody. There was no fame here, no stage lighting, no auto-tune, just the raw heartbeat of music. It reminded her why she'd ever started. A sudden flash of memory, herself, years ago, in fishnet tights and an oversized leather jacket, performing for 6 people in a basement bar. She remembered the burn of cheap vodka in her throat, the sticky floor beneath her heels, and how alive it had all felt. Now, here she was again, on the other side of the dream, watching someone else reach for the same stars. The girl opened her eyes, smiling nervously at her guitarist, and they finished the last line together. The crowd clapped, warm, polite, brief. A few people dropped $1 or $2 in the open guitar case. The singer bowed her head slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Gaga noticed how her hands trembled when she unplugged the mic. Maybe from the cold, maybe from nerves. She could have walked away right then, kept her anonymity, her peace, her quiet afternoon. But she didn't move. Something in her chest whispered, "Go on. Say something." Gaga bit her lip, heart starting to race. She hadn't felt this nervous in years. What if she startled them? What if they thought it was some kind of stunt? But another voice, softer, more honest, pushed back. Or maybe it's just meant to happen this way. She took one slow breath, stepped forward, and pulled her hands from her pockets. The young woman looked up, their eyes met for the briefest second. And in that tiny heartbeat, Gaga saw it. That same hunger, that same spark she'd carried all those years ago. It was time to say hello. The singer bent down to fix the small speaker cable, her breath visible in the cold air. Gaga hesitated just a few feet away, fingers fidgeting in her coat pocket. She didn't plan this. She never planned things like this. It just happened. "Hey," Gaga said softly, her voice calm but carrying that unmistakable tone. Warm, low, familiar to anyone who had ever heard her sing. The girl looked up. At first, she just smiled politely, probably expecting another kind stranger dropping a compliment before walking off. Hey, she replied, brushing a lock of hair from her face. You sound beautiful, Gaga said. Thanks. The girl laughed nervously. I'm still working on it. Don't, Gaga said. You already have it. The singer blinked, confused. She looked closer now, at the woman in the coat, the faint smile, the shape of her lips, the tone in her voice. Her eyes widened a little. Wait, she whispered. You sound like. Gaga pulled off her sunglasses, and in that instant, time stopped. The world around them, the cars, the chatter, the clicking heels of strangers, blurred into silence. The girl's mouth dropped open. No way. No freaking way. Gaga grinned. Way. A few people nearby started to notice the sudden change in energy. One guy in the crowd tilted his head, squinting. Another woman gasped. Oh my God, that's her. Before the recognition could explode, Gaga raised a finger to her lips and said, Shoo. Then she leaned closer to the girl. Mind if I borrow your mic for a second? The girl, speechless, just nodded and stepped back. Her guitarist froze, gripping the neck of his instrument like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Gaga took the microphone in one hand, turning it once, testing the weight, smiling like she'd just come home. Okay, she said, glancing around the small crowd that was rapidly growing. How about we try that chorus again? The girl let out a nervous laugh, still shaking. You mean together? Gaga winked. You lead. And just like that, one of the most unexpected duets in the middle of New York City was about to begin. The guitarist's hands trembled as he strummed the first chord again. The girl inhaled shakily, clutching the mic like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Gaga stood beside her, still half hidden under the hood of her coat, but everyone around could already feel it. The air changed. The first line came from the girl, a little shaky, but honest. Then Gaga joined in, her voice blending perfectly, effortlessly, like silk sliding into harmony. The contrast was magical, one voice raw and uncertain, the other rich and warm, wrapping around it like a safety net. Pedestrians stopped mid-step. A taxi pulled over, the driver leaning out the window with his phone raised. The city noise, honking, chatter, footsteps, faded into a quiet hum beneath the melody. Gaga didn't sing like a celebrity. She sang like a friend, like someone who remembered exactly how it felt to dream on the corner of a street. Every note had weight, but also freedom. She wasn't showing off. She was sharing. The girl's confidence grew with every line. By the time they reached the chorus, she was smiling wide, hitting notes she hadn't dared to before. Gaga grinned, nodding, encouraging her. Then the moment hit. I'm off the deep end. The two voices rose together, perfectly in sync. Goosebumps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "This can't be real." Another person cried quietly, hand over their mouth. When they reached the final, "We're far from the shallow now," the sound echoed through the narrow street like a prayer. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the crowd erupted. People cheered, clapped, shouted her name. Phones were up everywhere now, lights flashing, voices overlapping. But Gaga didn't care. She just turned to the girl, laughing, and pulled her into a hug. "You killed it," she said into her ear. "Don't ever stop singing. Promise me." The girl nodded, still too stunned to speak. I can't believe this," she managed to whisper. Gaga smiled. "Believe it. You earned it." And for the first time that day, Lady Gaga wasn't the superstar, she was the audience. The applause still echoed through the narrow street long after the last note faded. Phones were pointed from every angle, flashes lit up the air, but Gaga barely seemed to notice. She was laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh that came from deep inside, the kind she hadn't felt in months. The young woman beside her was trembling, her eyes glassy and red. I don't even know what to say," she stammered. Gaga grinned and handed her the microphone. "Say, let's do it again." That made the crowd laugh. The guitarist, still pale as a ghost, managed to mutter, "I think I forgot how to breathe." Gaga turned to him and playfully nudged his shoulder. "You did great. But next time, tune that thing before the queen shows up." The whole crowd burst out laughing. The tension melted away, replaced by something that felt like a block party. Strangers smiling at each other, people recording, even the grumpy hot dog vendor from the corner leaning out of his cart to clap. The girl covered her face with both hands, shaking her head. "I just sang with Lady Gaga on the street," she whispered, almost to herself. Gaga crouched beside the open guitar case and looked down. Inside were a few crumpled bills, some coins, and a half-empty water bottle. She smiled, reached into her coat pocket, and pulled out a small stack of folded cash. Without a word, she placed it inside the case, straightened up, and said, "That's for the next dream." The girl's mouth dropped open. "Oh my God, no, you don't have to." "I know," Gaga interrupted softly. "But I want to." The crowd cheered again, and someone shouted, "You're amazing, Gaga." She turned, waved, and said, "No, she's amazing," pointing to the girl. Phones captured every second, but in the middle of all that chaos, it didn't feel like a viral moment. It felt human, real. Two artists, one famous and one unknown, meeting halfway in the song that connected them both. As the noise slowly faded, Gaga tucked her hands into her coat again and smiled. "You're gonna remember this day for the rest of your life," she said quietly. The girl laughed through tears. "Are you kidding? I'll never sing again without thinking of you." Gaga leaned closer. "Good. That means I did my job." And with that, she winked, turned, and began to walk away down the street, the same way she came. The crowd parted for her, still clapping, still filming. But she didn't look back. She didn't need to. For a long moment, nobody moved. It was as if the entire street had forgotten how to breathe. The echoes of applause still lingered between the buildings, mingling with the soft buzz of city life returning. Horns, chatter, footsteps. The girl just stood there, the mic still in her hand, staring down the street where Gaga had disappeared into the crowd. "Did that really just happen?" she whispered. The guitarist laughed, a nervous, shaky sound. "I think so. Unless we all just collectively hallucinated the same thing." Someone from the crowd called out, "Is she coming back?" Another voice answered, "She just walked off like a movie scene." The girl finally lowered the mic and looked at the small group of strangers who had just witnessed her wildest dream come true. I didn't even get to thank her properly," she said, voice trembling. An older woman in the front smiled warmly. "Sweetheart, you already did. You sang your heart out." She saw it. People were smiling, cheering, congratulating them. Phones buzzed with notifications. Clips were already being uploaded to TikTok and Instagram. Someone shouted, "It's going viral already." The guitarist shook his head in disbelief. "We were just playing for lunch money 20 minutes ago," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Now I think we're trending." The girl laughed through tears. "She just showed up, like out of nowhere." "She's like that," said another street performer from across the road, watching with admiration. "Gaga's always been one of us. Just never forgot." The girl nodded slowly, still staring at the spot where Gaga had stood. The ground somehow felt sacred now, the same concrete, but different. She turned to her guitarist. "Do you think she really meant what she said? About my voice?" He smiled softly. "I think you just got told by Lady Gaga herself that you're good enough. I'd frame that moment if I were you." The girl laughed again, wiping her eyes. "Guess I better keep singing then." "Yeah," he said, tuning his guitar with trembling hands. "But no pressure. The entire internet's probably watching you now." They both burst out laughing, the tension finally breaking. And as the crowd slowly began to drift away, the girl took a deep breath, looked up at the gray sky, and whispered, almost to herself, "Thank you, Gaga." Then she smiled, turned to her friend, and said, "Let's play another one." Because if Lady Gaga had taught her anything in that moment, it was that the show should always go on. By the next morning, the world had already seen it. Clips of the performance flooded TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Different angles, different captions, all capturing the same surreal moment. Lady Gaga singing Shallow on a random New York street corner. Some videos showed the crowd's faces, others caught the exact second the girl realized who she was singing with. One clip, shaky and a bit out of focus, had over 10 million views in just a few hours. The comments were endless. "This is why I love her. She's still one of us. Imagine singing Gaga's song, then Gaga joins you." News outlets jumped on the story. Rolling Stone called it the most human moment of the year. BBC Entertainment ran a headline, "Lady Gaga reminds the world why music still belongs to the streets." The young singer, her name was Emily, woke up to hundreds of messages. Her phone nearly froze from notifications. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years sent screenshots of her face next to Gaga's. At first, She didn't know what to say. She wasn't chasing fame. She was just playing on a cold day, trying to pay rent and keep her dream alive. And now the whole world was watching her. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment uptown, Gaga scrolled through her phone. Every other post on her feed was that same video. Her hood pulled up, laughing, singing beside a stranger. She smiled. Her assistant walked in holding a coffee. You've seen it, right? It's everywhere. Should we make a statement? A post? Gaga shook her head. No statement, she said softly. Just this. She opened Twitter, typed a single sentence, and hit post. Never stop singing, even if no one's listening yet. Red heart. No hashtags. No tags. Just that. Within an hour, the tweet had 1 million likes. Fans instantly knew what it meant. Somewhere downtown, Emily saw it too. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming down her face. She remembered. She whispered. She actually remembered. Then, smiling through her tears, she picked up her guitar again and started playing. 3 days later, New York was still buzzing. Every entertainment show, every news site, every fan page talked about that street duet. But while the internet kept replaying the moment, life in the city moved on. Taxis still honked, coffee lines still stretched around the corner, and somewhere in Greenwich Village, music still echoed between the buildings. That's where Emily was again, sitting by the window of a small cafe, her guitar case leaning against the wall. The whirlwind of the past few days hadn't really sunk in yet. She had interviews waiting in her inbox, offers from managers she'd never met, even one message from a late-night show producer. It was too much. She took a sip of coffee, staring at her reflection in the window. For a moment, she missed the calm, the quiet street before the cameras, before the crowd. Just her song, and the sound of the city. Then the cafe door opened, and a gust of cold air swept through. Emily didn't look up at first, until she heard a familiar voice say, "Do you mind if I sit here?" She froze. Her heart skipped a beat. Slowly, she turned her head. There she was, Lady Gaga. No makeup, no sunglasses, just a beanie and that unmistakable smile. Holding her own cup of coffee, as if she'd just stepped out for a normal day. Emily blinked, stunned. You came back." Gaga smiled, sliding into the seat across from her. "I told you I'd remember." The cafe went quiet, people glancing, whispering, but Gaga didn't care. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, the same calm presence she'd had that day on the street. "I wanted to see how you're doing," she said. "All this attention can get loud fast. You okay with it?" Emily nodded, though her voice trembled. "I think so. It's just surreal. I'm still that girl singing on the corner." "That's good," Gaga said softly. "Stay her. Fame doesn't make the music, heart does." Emily exhaled, smiling nervously. "Can I just say thank you? For that day? For everything?" Gaga shook her head. "No, thank you. You reminded me what it feels like to sing without pressure. Just joy." For a few minutes, they sat quietly. Two musicians, two different worlds, same language. The city moved outside, snow beginning to fall, soft and slow. Before leaving, Gaga took out a folded napkin, scribbled something, and slid it across the table. "If you ever need help, studio time, advice, whatever, call this number. But promise me one thing." Emily looked up. "What's that?" "Never let this turn into noise. Keep it real." Emily nodded, eyes shining. "I will." Gaga smiled, stood, and said, "Good. Then I'll see you again, maybe on a bigger stage next time." As she walked out into the cold, a few snowflakes clung to her coat. Emily watched her go, that same disbelief still blooming in her chest. The napkin trembled in her hands. On it, below the number, Gaga had written one more line. "From one street singer to another, never stop." A few weeks later, the night finally came. It wasn't Madison Square Garden or a grand theater, just a small downtown venue, the kind that smelled of coffee, old wood, and dreams. The kind of place where everything started. Emily stood backstage, her hands trembling as she tuned her guitar for the 5th time. Her name, Emily Rose, was written in chalk on the sign outside. It felt strange seeing it there, real and glowing under the soft yellow lights. The manager gave her a thumbs up. "You're on in 2." She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and whispered to herself, "Don't think about the cameras. Don't think about the internet. Just sing." When she stepped onto the stage, the room greeted her with quiet applause. Maybe 40 people, some fans, some curious locals, a few who recognized her from that viral video. The lights were warm and gentle, not blinding like fame, but comforting. She smiled nervously, sat down on the stool, and said into the mic, "Hi. I'm Emily. You might have seen me singing on a street corner a few weeks ago. I still can't believe any of that really happened." Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. She strummed once, steadying her breath. "This song," she said, voice cracking just a bit, "is for the person who reminded me that music doesn't need a stage to matter." And then she began to play. The first note filled the room. Clear, gentle, honest. It wasn't shallow this time. It was her own song. One she'd written the night after that cafe meeting, about moments that change your life quietly, without warning. Every word sounded like gratitude set to melody. Every line held the pulse of that day. The fear, the awe, the warmth of being seen. And somewhere near the back, unnoticed by most, someone slipped into the room wearing a long coat and a dark hat. She sat quietly, hands folded, listening. No bodyguards, no cameras, no one knowing she was there. Gaga smiled faintly as Emily reached the chorus, her voice steady now, glowing with confidence. People in the audience swayed softly. Some filmed, but most just listened. It wasn't about going viral anymore. It was about being heard. When Emily sang the final line, "We're all just songs waiting to be found," the crowd rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the tiny venue. Gaga stood too, clapping slowly, eyes shining with pride. Emily saw her then, just for a second, and froze mid-bow. Gaga put a finger to her lips, smiling, and mouthed 2 words. "Keep going." Then she slipped out quietly before anyone else noticed. Emily stood there, breathless, tears in her eyes. She didn't need to chase her anymore. Because somehow, that moment said everything words never could. Months passed. The snow melted, spring arrived, and the world had long moved on to new headlines and fleeting trends. But for Emily, everything had changed. She wasn't famous, not in the red carpet sense, but she was heard. Her first single, "Streetlights and Dreams," quietly climbed streaming charts, not because of a marketing push, but because people felt it. It was real. It was honest. It was her. She recorded it in a borrowed studio, using that napkin with Gaga's note as a bookmark in her lyric journal. The words came easily, about strangers, about moments that matter only once, about finding your voice in the noise. When the song released, the comments flooded in. "This sounds like hope." "I can hear her smile in every line." "This is what music should feel like." And somewhere across the ocean, on a late-night talk show in London, Lady Gaga sat on a couch under bright studio lights, wearing a soft grin as the host showed the viral clip again, the duet that had started it all. "So," the host said, leaning forward, "that was one of the most beautiful moments we've seen online all year. What made you stop that day?" Gaga tilted her head, smiling gently. "You know, I didn't stop for the cameras. I stopped because I heard someone singing my song like they meant it. And I remembered that once I was her." The audience fell silent. She continued softly, "Music isn't about fame. It's about connection, the kind that happens on a street corner, between 2 people who just believe in the same melody." The host smiled. "Have you talked to her since?" Gaga chuckled. "She doesn't need me anymore. She found her voice. That's the whole point, isn't it?" Back in New York, Emily watched that interview alone in her small apartment. Her guitar rested against the wall, a cup of tea steaming beside her. When Gaga said that line, Emily smiled, the kind of smile that comes with peace, not surprise. She reached for her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and wrote at the top, "For the woman who heard me first." Then she picked up her guitar and began to play again. The city outside hummed softly, lights flickering like tiny stars. And somewhere, far away but still close in spirit, another song was being born, one that didn't belong to fame or fortune, but to connection. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one song, to remind the world that music still belongs to the streets. A few months later, summer heat rolled through the city, and with it came the sound of open windows, laughter, and music on every corner. Emily's song had started spreading beyond New York, college dorms, cafes, buskers performing it on sidewalks. It wasn't viral like the duet video had been. It was something quieter, more enduring. People were living with her song, singing it in the car, humming it in the shower. covering it on TikTok with captions like, "This one makes me feel seen." But one version stood out. A video filmed in Italy showed a street musician playing Streetlights and Dreams. The audio was rough, traffic roaring in the background. But when he sang the chorus, the camera panned to a little girl sitting cross-legged on the curb, singing along. Emily found the clip one night while scrolling in bed. The caption read, "Even the small songs travel far." She smiled, tears glinting in the glow of her phone screen. She didn't repost it, didn't comment, just whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Halfway across the world, Gaga saw the same video. It popped up on her feed under a fan account with the tag hashtag from one street singer to another. She watched the whole thing, the old man with his guitar, the little girl singing Emily's words. When the chorus hit, Gaga's eyes softened. She sent the clip to her manager with a single message. "Book me a flight to Rome. I want to meet him." Her manager replied instantly, "The street performer?" Gaga answered, "The song found him. I just want to hear it again where it belongs." A week later, tourists in Rome stopped mid-walk when they saw a familiar woman in a white hat and sunglasses standing in front of a busker, smiling. The man blinked, nearly dropping his guitar. "No, non è possible." Gaga laughed. "Mind if I sing along?" He nodded, speechless. And once again, just like in New York, Lady Gaga sang on the street. Not for the crowd, not for cameras, but for the love of a song that started in the hands of a stranger. The circle had closed. Somewhere back in New York, Emily opened her window, hearing street musicians below. They were singing her song, and she whispered, smiling, "Guess it really did belong to the streets." Weeks later, Emily returned to the same corner where everything began. The city was quieter now, bathed in the soft gold of early evening. She set down her guitar, smiled at the small crowd that had gathered, and said, "Let's bring it back to where it started." As she began to sing, a familiar voice joined in, gentle, warm, unmistakable. Lady Gaga was standing beside her again, hood up, smiling. No lights, no cameras, just music. Their voices blended perfectly, two melodies meeting where it all began. The crowd listened in silence, caught between disbelief and awe. When the last chord faded, Gaga whispered, "Now it's yours." Emily smiled. "No," she said softly. "Now it's ours." And the street, once again, belonged to the song.